Today we're taking a look at writing exponential equations just by giving a couple points. So we're going to be taking a look at this as our first situation. So notice we're given 2 points and we're told to write an exponential equation that's passing through that. Now in this type of case, we're actually looking at a very particular form of the exponential equation. We're going to go ahead and assume there's no shifts or anything like that in there. The only two numbers that are going to change are going to be the base of our exponential and the coefficient out front. And from there, we can go ahead and build an equation that now goes through these 2 points. In order to do this, we can actually set it up as a system of 2 equations that we then can solve just like we would if we were solving linear. It's just that the algebra that we do is going to look a little different in this case. So I'm going to take my first point here and I'll plug that into my equation, where I'm plugging the x in for x, and I'm plugging the y value from the point in for y in the original equation. Now, I repeat the same process for the second point there. And we now have 2 equations with 2 unknowns. So now it's just a matter of figuring out how can we solve for it. In order to do that, I'm basically going to use substitution method here. So I'm going to try to figure out what a equals in the equations, and then I can use that as a way to combine the 2 equations. So I'm going to take that first equation and solve for a. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by b to the 7th. And so I now have a value for a, which I can then take and plug in for a in the other equation. And having done that, notice we now have one equation with just one unknown in it. It's only got the b in it. So that means it's something we can actually solve. In order to solve this, the very first thing that you want to do here is go ahead and simplify the b's. Because basically what we have here is 7530 b to the 15th all over b to the 7th, and the b to the 15th over b to the 7th is going to be able to simplify down to just be b to the power of 8, because when we divide our variables, we subtract their exponents. And now that we are at this equation right here, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by the 7,530, which leaves me with about 8.157 equal to b to the 8th. I still need to figure out what b is, so that means now getting rid of the 8th power. In order to get rid of an exponent like that, we can actually use a root. So like if it was b squared, we take the square root. Since it's b to the 8th, we're going to go ahead and take the 8th root of both sides. And your calculator probably does not have an 8th root button on it. And so this is where we can use some of our exponent rules. And those tell us that the 8th root of x is the same thing as x to the power of 1/8. So that's what we'll actually type into our calculator here. So with that 8.157 still showing on your calculator, you don't have to retype it back in because you probably didn't press clear before. You can go ahead and take that number to the power of 1/8. And yes, put parentheses around that 1/8 when you type it in your calculator. It's going to make sure you end up getting the right number out. And this is going to be a chance now. Go ahead and practice that, and let's make sure you can get the right number out of it. You should be getting an answer of 1.29999. Okay, let's just call that 1.3 as our value of b there. Now, we aren't totally done with this process yet, but just to recap what we've done so far, we wrote our 2 starting equations over here, and then once I did that, then I solved one of them for a. Once I had one of those solved for a, I plugged that value for a into the other equation's a value, and that gave us this equation down here. Now once we had that, then I simplified it by simplifying the b to the 15th over b to the 7th. Dividing the variables meant subtracting the exponents. That's where I got this b to the 8th. And then I divided both sides by 7530 to get this 8.157. And then in order to get rid of the 8th power, we did the 8th root of that number, and we saw that the 8th root is the same as the power of 1/8. And so I took my number to the power of 1/8 to get my final answer of about 1.3. All right, and now that we've done that, we now need to go ahead and figure out what would a actually equal. Well, we got an equation up here that'll let us do that fairly easily. I can go ahead and just take what I've just figured out for b and plug it into this equation in order to then figure out the value of a. And so I take that value of 1.3 that I just found for b, and I plug that in for b in my equation there. Now it's a matter of plugging it into our calculator to see what that's going to give us. And that gives us an answer here of about 1,200 for a value of a. All right, so now we've figured out what does b equal and what does a equal from this general equation, which means I can now write out what the final equation would be, which is y equals my a value, which was 1,200, times b, which was 1.3, to the power of x. And this problem is now done. Now this first one that we did here, it's really about learning the process. It also is actually probably one of the trickier ones you might see in terms of the numbers, because some of the numbers in this, they're big numbers. They're decimals. You're going to be seeing a lot of these where they actually work out to be a lot prettier numbers. But I figure if you can do it with this one, those are going to be a lot smoother. But of course, there will be other examples available for you to watch and learn from if you want to be able to take a look at some more of these, because yeah, it does take a little getting used to.